The next artist I can tell you about is Bonnie Camplin, who's a UK-based artist. And she is really interested in this relationship between, the objects and the person who's witnessing the objects. And she's also really interested in psychic phenomena and these sort of altered states that you can get yourself into through various rituals, and how in those various rituals, objects and situations and environments play a really, really important part. So she's making a new work called Deep Sea Voyante, which is this chamber that you'll be able to go into, and she's making this film which shows these objects that she's chosen, sort of filmed and made into an animation, which kind of shows these sort of sets of auratic phenomena around these objects that she's kind of invented. But as you go into this chamber, you'll be invited to bring your own object and also kind of get this sense of this of their own potential for kind of creating psychic phenomena. So that's her work. Louise Hervé and Chloé Mallet are the next artists, and they are two young French artists who've been working together for quite a long time now. One of them is a historian and the other is only an artist. So a lot of what they're interested in is ancient histories and how these sort of ancient histories play out or kind of impact on our present situation. So they have together made this new film for us, which is based on an older work called A Treatise on Baths, that looks at the way humans have used water for pleasure through millennia. So bathing, the Roman baths, all these sorts of things, but how in the they're sort of imagining a future scenario whereby, due to global warming and rising sea levels, water will cease to be pleasurable for us and will actually be something that we have to really fight against. And in parallel to that, they're imagining this sort of new creature that evolves out of our new relationship with water, which is embodied by this figure who, in fact, you can't see in this picture, but this character that they've invented has gills and webbed feet. So it's this sort of sci-fi version of a future based on this kind of ecological disaster scenario. Judith Hopf we're also similarly not entirely sure what she's going to do, but it's likely that she will make a new series of sculptures. She's really interested in anthropomorphism and how animals and objects have their own consciousness or a sort of potentially a different way of relating to the world around us, and how as humans we can become differently connected to those kinds of consciousnesses. So one film that she's made, for example, is, which we don't have an image of here, but if you Google her name you'll find it quite easily because it's a very famous film of hers, that it's this person wearing this kind of egg costume, which is a little bit like a sort of Bauhaus ballet outfit, and trying to kind of negotiate but not able to get into any of the doors, or finding it hard to maneuver. So it's this idea of the sort of anthropomorphic object and their relationship with the world around them, and this idea of this sort of two quite conflicting forms of modernism coming up against each other. Norma Jean, who some of you might know that Norma Jean is actually the birth name of Marilyn Monroe. So Norma Jean is actually an Italian artist who never appears in public or to give interviews. He always operates under this pseudonym called Norma Jean. And the idea is that anybody who becomes part of the artistic process of making the work also becomes Norma Jean as well. So it's this idea of a kind of anonymous collective endeavour towards the making of an artwork. So this is a work, for example, that he made for the Venice Biennial in 2007. And it started off, this is all plasticine, and it started off as this big cube in 3 layers, one black, one white and one red, and people were just invited to kind of tear apart the plasticine and make new shapes. And as you can see, people went really crazy and kind of made text on the wall and sort of rolled around in it and did all these various different things. And the idea was that all of these people now are Norma Jean, so everybody is a kind of collective participant in the work. And one of the things that he is doing for the biennial is, that we're hoping that he's going to do, is not completely confirmed, is that there will be an ice machine in the space which will be continually producing ice, and that is going to be powered by a solar panel on the roof connected to a rain bucket. So the rainwater will feed down into the ice machine, which is powered by the solar panel. So in the same way that everybody is involved in producing the physical work, he's instrumentalizing almost the machines into becoming Norma Jean as well. This next person is an artist called Nicola L, who is quite a senior artist now. And if anybody knows anything about New York and, pop culture, you would know about the Chelsea Hotel. And she is one of the last remaining artists who's living in the Chelsea Hotel, which is kind of amazing to me. And she has, for many years, been making these sort of hybrid, sort of sculptural, functional furniture forms which take the human body as a reference point. So as well as these, she's got another one of these which is really similar, the sort of companion piece to this, which is lovely, which is where this piece is an aquarium. This piece is the bookcase and the brain is the aquarium. So yeah, she uses the human body in really sort of playful ways, and there's a really nice sofa which is a giant foot. So we're having a number of her works throughout the space. William Levitt is also another older artist who was really involved in the sort of LA modernist movement in the 1960s and 70s. And there's this phrase that's very associated with his practice, which is the theatre of the ordinary. So he's based in LA, where, as you can imagine, he's really surrounded by the movie industry, set design, all these very kind of artificial representations of everyday life. And he's really interested in taking these artificial representations. I mean, you can kind of see here there's this sort of set idea that's really present in works like this. He's really interested in taking these kind of unreal representations and then placing them completely outside of their native context. So they're not, out of the film studio into the gallery, which makes this kind of strange rupture again between reality and fiction, or asks us to question our suspension of disbelief that we would usually have in watching a film or seeing these sorts of sets. And sometimes he organises plays that will happen in the gallery using these as a backdrop as well. The next artist is Christina Ramberg, who is unfortunately no longer with us. She died in the mid-1980s, if I remember correctly. It probably says in your notes. And she was part of a movement called the Chicago Imagists, who would take a lot of their subjects were again quite figurative, but using the figure in kind of cartoonish, slightly unsettling ways. And Christina Ramberg is very known for painting these images of the female body and the way that we adorn ourselves. Well, not me, but many people adorn themselves in sort of satiny undergarments and things like that, and really sort of playing with the abstraction that gives to the human body, these various different sort of uncomfortable or cartoon-like shapes that we sort of push and mould our bodies into. So Sally mentioned that we're working with the maths department at Liverpool John Moores University. It's actually, the mathematics and computing department. This is a work called Proof of the Devil, which Michael Stevenson, who's a New Zealand-based artist, has been working with. It's a kind of ongoing project for him. And it started, the first time he did it was in Panama a number of years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but he was in Panama working towards this show, and he'd found out about this really interesting mathematician who was at the local university, who had this claim that you could find proof of the devil in the hinge of a door. So what that means is, you know, when you are, you know, walking along a corridor and you come to a door, and you might be chatting with someone, or you might just be on your own, and you know when it says push, but somehow your instinct is to pull, and vice versa. So it's this idea that even in the most educated academic scenario, there's always that little bit of doubt, or this kind of instinct that you have that kind of goes the other way, where you try and push, but actually you're supposed to pull. So this kind of moment of uncertainty within an everyday action that suddenly brings everything else into question. So this mathematician from Panama had this idea that the proof of the devil, which is suddenly, okay, therefore we can't prove whether the devil exists or not. It's this kind of action that suddenly brings many, many things and many of our normal beliefs completely into question. So we are borrowing some doors from the maths department at Liverpool University, which is very generous of them to lend them to us. And we're going to create these similar situations like this, where the door is actually hung on a specially made frame. But rather than this push and pull label, maybe you would say, being on the front of the door, actually all of these are connected to another room which has a bunch of computers in, which are creating a situation where the push and the pull is completely random. So the computer will maybe at 1 minute tell the electronic door hinge that if someone tries to push it, it actually pulls, but then if you try the door a few minutes later, it's the other way around. Does that make sense? Okay, good, great. And they're inventing this whole kind of program for us that's based on computer games and this kind of battle for good and evil that you usually have in computer games. So they're taking those games so through those games, through some of the programming that exists already in these computer games, that's what's going to create this kind of electronic system. So if the good guy dies, it will be push. If the bad guy dies, it will be pull. But the computers will be playing themselves in a kind of closed circuit, so you'll never really be able to tell which way it's going to go. Joseph Strauss and Stefan Cherepnin. Similarly, we have no idea what they're going to do yet. They're also going to come and spend some time here in the city and sort of develop a concept and actually really make something on site, which is really, really exciting for us, because it means that we'll have something which is really connected to the building and the space, we think. Joseph Strauss is an artist and a writer, and similarly he's really interested in unpacking these things that happen to us every day, and a lot of his work manifests itself as short stories and writings where he'll really kind of highlight this moment, which actually to us might seem quite normal, but for him it's got this really sort of particular resonance to it. I mean, I'm sure we all share in these things where something happens and it causes a kind of rupture in our everyday lives, and he's going to be working in collaboration with Stefan Cherepnin, who's a musician, and they often work together kind of forming soundtracks for these sculptures that Joseph Strauss is making. Peter Faschler, his name is spelt wrong there, but anyway, he's Peter Faschler, who is a German artist, and he's creating a new work for us, which will, similarly, we're not entirely sure what it's going to be yet, but I'll tell you a little bit about this series of animations, which is a series he's been working on for some years now, which will be within the exhibition. And he's really interested in these kind of moments of depression and anxiety that come into our lives, and how the kind of repetitiveness of certain forms of work or certain forms of behaviour can really come to define our entire existence. So there's a depressing element to it, but it's usually humorous as well, but it has this kind of dark humour to it. So this character here, and also he's interested in how these kinds of ideas play out through cartoons, animations, things that are sort of surrounding us every day. So this anthropomorphic rat character is kind of continually going to work, coming back, going to work, coming back, etc. The last artist I will talk about in the group show is Amelie von Wolfen, who makes these sort of paintings and illustrations, also similarly these sort of objects and fruit. She does a lot of these sort of fruit that are engaging in everyday life situations. This is some fruit playing a game of spin the bottle. Okay, so moving from the group exhibition, I know I'm going to go a bit quicker because I'm just aware of the time. At FACT, which is, as I said, this sort of place where you come to see film, cinema, and new media work, we've invited an LA-based artist called Sharon Lockhart to present a solo exhibition. Sharon Lockhart's really interested in cinema and documentary forms as well, and often she really alights on these moments of labour or action and really spends a lot of time looking at those moments. So for example, this work, Podwórko, which she made in 2009, shows this group of children in the town of Lodz in Poland who are really using, she noticed how these children who don't necessarily have playgrounds around them, all these sorts of things that we would probably find quite common, how they've actually started using the city as their playground. So they're using it as a jungle gym, drawing patterns and flowers onto the wall. They've really kind of reinvented the way they use the city themselves. And this film, as I remember, it lasts around 20 minutes, and it just shows this. So it's just this really kind of careful, close look at these children and how they interact with the city. We're commissioning a new series of works from her, which takes as a starting point a relationship that she has with Milena, who's one of the children that she met during the making of Podwórko in 2009. And ever since then, she's been going back to where Milena lives, which is in an orphanage in Poland, to spend time with her and make work that really kind of uses her life as a starting point for thinking about the rights of children, how children have a voice within society, and the sort of everyday life of a child in that situation. So she's just about to spend 3 weeks working with Milena and about 20 other girls from her orphanage. And also Sharon's collaborating with a philosopher and educationalist called Bartosz Przybyl, who is going to work with her to create a kind of curriculum of philosophy and play for these children, so they can really sort of start to think about these kind of much bigger ideas in society and in the world around them as well. And she'll make a film from that, which we will premiere in October. At the Blue Coat, which, as I was mentioning before, is the oldest centre for contemporary art in Liverpool, and somewhere where artists really meet, is an exhibition of James McNeill Whistler. This is not necessarily the painting that you would associate with Whistler in the slightest. Probably the one that you would know is Whistler's mother, and all these very beautiful portraits of women just sort of standing on their own. But Whistler, the way we're presenting Whistler is really as one of the first contemporary artists in the way that we understand them today. So somebody who is very, very preoccupied with the sort of distribution and display of his artwork. So as well as kind of experimenting with abstraction and, and different sort of forms of representation, Whistler was really engaged in the sort of role and the value of the artist within society, to the point at which he would take he took one of his critics to court, not because he thought he was going to win, but because he felt that it was a really important public forum where he could stand up and talk about the role of the artist in society, not just as a follower of fashion or a follower of his patrons, but really as somebody who has something intellectual to contribute. This is an incredibly damning portrait of one of his patrons. And we're also going to be recreating this back panel of the Peacock Room, which is one of his very famous kind of, you would probably call it something along the lines of an installation. And one of his patrons, F.R. Leyland, who is actually the person who's so cruelly caricatured in here, so this is his patron, invited Whistler to just touch up his dining room after Leyland had bought this really beautiful painting. But actually what Whistler did was to paint the entire room green and all these kind of incredible gold decorations, because he just thought that would look better. And Leyland was completely furious and asked Whistler to repair the damage. So Whistler went back and then made it even more dramatic by painting these two peacocks onto one section. And this rather sort of hectoring peacock is supposed to represent Leyland, and this one is supposed to represent Whistler. So he was really, really antagonistic, and just really always felt that the artist should not be told what to do by the patron, that it's really the role of the artist to make those kinds of decisions. So through this recreation of this back panel and various different sort of drawings and etchings and also plans for exhibitions, before Whistler started making exhibitions of his own work, you would really always have seen this kind of crazy salon hang of kind of paintings stacked up everywhere. You could not really see much wall at all. But Whistler is actually one of the people who's credited with inventing the white cube space. So this idea of a space of actually really looking at the art in a very concentrated way, and whatever happens around it, whether it's sort of a colour on the wall or the way the exhibition assistant is supposed to dress, all of those things should be in harmony with the artwork rather than at odds with it. So here's let's just go through that quickly. So at Tate Liverpool, there's two things happening at Tate Liverpool. There is a collection hang upstairs, and then there is a new commission by a French architect called Claude Parent in the Wolfson Gallery, which is that first big gallery that you see immediately you walk in. Claude Parent is 93 now, and so it's amazing to be able to work with him to make a new commissioned piece. This is an image of the commission that he did for the Venice Biennial in 1970, and it shows his kind of ongoing obsession with slants and slopes. And he really thought that by removing normal furniture and building walls in your house and outside in a completely different way, you could start to think about your own body in space completely differently. So for example, in his own house, he made these kinds of adjustments to his own house, taking all the furniture out. And there's an amazing account of his daughter who describes what happened when visitors would come to the house and how they'd kind of walk along the floor, and suddenly Claude Parent would have put this kind of cushion in the floor that you were able to sit on and hang out. But of course, as a visitor, you wouldn't know that, so you'd just be sort of walking along and suddenly you'd fall into this kind of cushioned bit. So he is making a version of this. This is him now with the structure that he's going to do for the Wolfson Gallery, and it's also going to house various different works from the Tate collection as well. So he's really conceiving it as a machine for viewing art. So just thinking about the space of the gallery as being kind of, or the institution as being kind of interrupted, so the visitor will be forced to walk around the Tate and see the work there in a completely new and different way. So just to rush through this bit, Upstairs on the second floor where the Tate collection hang usually is, Tate have very generously invited us to work with the entire Tate collection. So in the same way that the Wolfson Gallery downstairs is physically interrupting the space of an institution by asking you to walk around and see it differently, upstairs the curators have decided that this idea of the domestic space, or a kind of representation of that through artists' works, will really dominate the collection hang. So they've identified various different artists who really work in this way. So again, who kind of look at their everyday surroundings in the sort of domestic interior and domestic habits. So that will really characterise the Tate collection hang. I'll just go quite quickly through these slides. As you can see, there's a lot of amazing artists there. Jeff Cornelis is a Belgian TV maker who made a series of documentaries for Belgian television in the 1970s, and so you would see them on TV in your house, or at your friend's house, but the way he viewed his subjects really became reflected in the way he made the documentary itself. So there would often be these kind of various different unusual juxtapositions, really reflecting the content of the artwork itself. When he made these kind of interview documentaries, he would always interview everybody from the person on the street to the cleaning lady to sort of pretty much everybody who was involved in the process. We're doing a performance weekend that happens from the 19th to the 21st of September, and it's conceived and narrated by a writer called Angie Kiefer, who's from New York. And it involves these different people, and it's taking the structure of an everyday and what you might do in the morning. We might have a performance that happens at 10 a.m. in the coffee shop, and then something a little bit later at the bus stop. So it's taking the sort of times and habits of every day as a kind of framework for artists to respond to. God, I'm sorry, this is really taking a really long time. Shall I wrap it up in 2 seconds? Yeah, I'll go quick. Okay. All right, so annual commissions. So outside of the biennial exhibition, A Needle Walks into the Haystack, we also are working on these big annual commissions, some of which will be presented outside of the time of the biennial. So this first one is actually going to open in June, and I don't know how many of you know about dazzle camouflage. Yeah, great. It was something that was used a lot in World War I, and someone at the War Office basically got really obsessed with the way abstract painting at that time would kind of dazzle and baffle the eye, so you're not really quite sure what you're looking at. So that person commissioned artists to create dazzle camouflage for ships, and I think a couple of thousand ships were painted in this way during the First World War. It wasn't massively effective, so it only happened in the First World War, not the Second, but it still created this absolutely incredible and very striking, aesthetic. And we are working with National Museums Liverpool and also 1418 Now, which, as some of you might know, is the kind of cultural commissioning arm of the 1418 First World War commemorations. So we're working in partnership with them and also with Tate to dazzle this ship, which some of you might know, which is the Edmund Gardner, which is just kind of between Tate and the Museum of Liverpool, and it's in dry dock. And this is an artist called Carlos Cruz Diaz, who is fantastic, and he's developed all these incredible optical techniques through his years of working. And as you can see, he's really into dazzle, as seen in his jumper and table. But he's really, really excited to be working with us on this commission, because he's also, as you can imagine, been really, really interested in dazzle camouflage. So for him, this is an amazing opportunity. And he's also in his early 90s, so it's really special to be able to work with him now. And he's going to dazzle the ship. He's also dazzled road crossings. On the 5th of July, we will present a large performance work in the Anglican Cathedral, and that performance work is Michael Nyman, who's collaborating with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra. And so since Hillsborough happened, Nyman has always been thinking about this idea of how to memorialise such an incredibly significant event. What could you possibly do that gives proper resonance and proper respect to that situation? He's also a really big football fan, so this has been really in his mind for a really long time. And he has kind of made the sort of beginnings of working for this memorial, but this will be the first time that it's premiered in its fullest form. So this performance will happen on the 5th of July, and it features an amazing soprano singer called Catherine Rudge, who's from Liverpool, who's going to sing the 92 names. So I think it's going to be a really sort of special way to mark the opening of the biennial, but also it's Michael Nyman's 70th year as well, so he really, really wanted to do something special for that occasion. As Sally mentioned, it's not just the biennial exhibition that's happening. We also kind of fold in partner exhibitions that are happening through the city at the same time. John Moore's Painting Prize, I'm sure you know about, and Bloomberg New Contemporaries will also be happening during the time of the biennial. And the Exhibition Research Centre will present an Adrian Henry exhibition, and at Open Eye there will also be a photographic exhibition as well. Okay, that's it. Thank you. But if anyone has any questions, ask me now, or I'm sure we'll. Yeah, no, not never again. I'm sure we'll feature there, or you know.